This is in response to Grizzly 907 LA. I guess I'm gonna call it Understanding Black Culture. Um, I don't know when this video is gonna cut off. Not used to making videos on YouTube. Understanding Black Culture. There's a lot of things that you said in your video that, you know, your average African American would take as offensive, and they were offensive. And the only reason they're offensive is because you don't understand the culture. I'm not going to present, this whole victimization card for African Americans, but there's certain things that you said, and I constantly hear white people saying, and they need to be addressed so that, there can be, I guess, some type of exchange, intellectual exchange, as opposed to the name calling and the ranting and the racial or racist remarks and everything. I'm like, I don't play that. Okay. In your video, you were talking about the culture, in the African American community, in these ghettos and these deprived areas and whatnot. Okay, you talked about one of your viewers, Luigi. He talked about, I think it was him, somebody on your page was talking about this promotion, by the elites of putting that stuff out there. And I always notice there's like this battle that goes on between white people, between who's doing what. I'm not a fan of Republicans. I believe most Republicans are racist. I believe that most white people who take a Republican stance have no business being Republican, because a lot of them are maybe one step above being in the same circumstance or situation as many African Americans, but the security blanket of whiteness makes them feel that they're in a club that they're not really in. I am a firm believer in the existence of white supremacy. I believe this nation was founded on white supremacy, and white supremacy is a system that is trying to be maintained. Problem is that your working class white people believe themselves to be on the same team as the white elites, and they're not. They're simply the facilitators of maintaining that white infrastructure. They're the buffers. They were given the honorary overseer card because as long as the white working class is given slightly more than the Negroes, then they will accept their place in that whole white hierarchy or that white structure. It's divide and conquer. The best way to create a situation of divide and conquer is to give one more than the other. And you can look up a slave revolt known as Bacon's Rebellion, where some white indentured servitude or servants teamed up with some black slaves, and they were going to overthrow the white elite. And this was in Virginia. And basically, one of the white guys snitched. A bunch of people got hung and beheaded, and the white elite basically figured out, we can't have this. So we're going to make the poor working class white man, we're going to make him honorary overseer and make him feel like he's a part of this club when he's not. We're not inviting him to the Bilderberg group meetings. We're not inviting him to Trilateral. We're going to make him feel like he's, he has a stake in this. Okay, we're going to make him feel like he is a part of this. We're going to fill his head full of patriotism, which will have him defending a position that is wholly against his own economic situation, his own economic interest. I think a white guy in Kansas, what did he write that book called, something funny about Kansas or something? I forget the title of the book. But he talked about Kansas, and he talked about the poor whites voting against their economic interests. Now, when it comes to the African American community, you have to look at the African American community as a group that has been wholly locked out of the system. I know white people don't like to think that, because the white elites, they like to go back and forth and pander to each side, whether Republican or Democrat. That's just what they do. They, how do I want to put this? So in one instance, Well, I can't even think of I'm trying to think of a really good example, but I only got so much time, so I'm not going to even go down. I'm not even going to go down. I can explain that in other videos and whatnot. But basically, what they do is they create this animosity on either side not just with each group, but they create this animosity where you have, where it's like there's an acknowledgement that injustice was done, and then they'll turn around and then act like they're trying to fix that problem, and then use that as a reason to upset whites by saying, look at all the free stuff white people got or black people got. So black people got all this free stuff, and you should all be angry about it because they're just lazy and getting it for free, despite it's supposed to be there to correct a lot of the injustices that transpired before. Getting to the African American community. Since the African American community is locked out, and what do I mean by locked out? Black people were doing best in this country underneath Jim Crow and underneath, I'd say, between the 40s and somewhere in the mid 60s. Okay, where there were jobs, people were working. It was segregated, but people had, gainful employment. There were plenty of factory jobs. I mean, that's why black people left the South. That's why the whole Great Migration kicked off in the first place. They left the South to get jobs in the North. Okay. And when they came to the North, because there was segregation, they were forced to establish their own businesses, their own communities, and you had a structure there. They joined whites, and in trying to join whites with the whole push of integration, which I think was the worst thing that ever happened to African Americans, they basically thought, well, white people have a bigger and better infrastructure, so we're joining them so we don't need to mind our own. Okay, those jobs are always going to be there. That gainful employment is always going to be there. And so, as soon as integration kicked off, they weren't supporting black businesses. They weren't going to black stores. They wanted to go to Sears. They wanted to go to Macy's. And that's all a part of, white supremacy, which is something that even black people internalize, because black people always see themselves in a negative light, always see themselves portrayed in a negative light thanks to white media. Okay, and they internalize that, and everything that white people do and everything that white people have is so great, and black people want to have it. Okay, so it's a bit of an inferiority complex. So one of the issues with that is when white people started closing the doors, and some of it I believe to be intentional. Other aspects of it, I just simply believe that you had the white elites who were a bunch of, greedy individuals decided, hey, we can take our businesses and go over to China and pay these people $2 an hour, and we don't have to pay them, $13 an hour to put a car together. You know what I mean? Or manufacture the parts. So slowly, it wasn't just the auto industry. It was basically just everything. Even Apple computers today are made where? In China. Okay? Everybody can't go to college. Okay, that's the biggest fallacy in the world. If everybody went to college degrees would mean essentially nothing. Their value would be in the gutter. This is why they only let there be so many doctors, so they can demand a high rate. This is why they only let there be so many lawyers, so it demands a high rate. You want to keep professions isolated. This is why this people running around with notions of complete and total equality in a capitalistic society are just false, or a capitalist society. It's just false. It's not the way it is. What I'm looking for is not necessarily equality. I'm just looking for a little bit more parity. I don't believe in letting the bottom fall out and people leave people with nothing, because when people have nothing to lose, that's when they're coming for your shit. Okay? They have nothing to lose, and white people seem not to care about what goes on in the black community, whether they have the ability to put food on the table, whether they have a job or not, until it spills into their community, and then, their daughter Rebecca gets carjacked, raped, and left in a ditch somewhere just outside Camden. Then all of a sudden, they want to cry and they want to say, and that's what those dirty, filthy niggers do. That's what those animals do. That's what those savages do. Not understanding the full context, the totality of the situation, and where it starts and where it spawns. Okay, and where it starts and where it spawns is in employment and jobs and opportunities. Okay, when men have the ability to maintain their community through gainful employment, you're going to have things spark up like small businesses. You're going to have things spark up where you have women who are dependent on men for their survival. white women are dependent on white men for their economic survival. Okay, white men have a whole infrastructure that they're building and maintaining, and that basically creates a strong patriarchy. The only thing that keeps a patriarchy is female dependency. Okay, when women are no longer dependent on that particular man, the whole thing comes crashing down. And with African Americans, that is what has happened, because when black men lose their jobs and they're unemployed and nobody wants to hire them due to all those racial stereotypes that they have in their head, even when the black man is looking for gainful employment, then that means he can't take care of his household. That means he can't take care of his kids. His kids are also not dependent on him. That means when he's not maintaining the household deteriorates. That means he's going to feel some type of way about not being able to do that. The woman's going to emasculate him, okay? Because, he's not bringing anything to the table. So in a lot of those situations, men leave. They leave because they feel ashamed about their inability to take care of their family. And then people say, oh, why don't they stick around? Stick around and do what? Stick around and do what? The man cannot do anything if he does not have the resources to do it. That's what people don't understand, nor do they want to acknowledge. It seems like everything's okay for white men and that to have that structure, but it's not okay for black men to have that structure. And then we want to cry and complain about the criminalization of blacks and how, they're just degenerates and everything. It's almost like, I remember I got into an argument with a white man a while ago, and he was telling me how he doesn't hire blacks because blacks are they're lazy or they're less educated or whatever. But he wanted them all to get off of welfare. And I said, well, how are they supposed to get off of welfare if you're in the position to hire them, but you won't hire them based on your biases? How is that going to work? How do they get off of welfare if, let's just say, every white man or every other white man felt the same way as you did? Every time they go to an interview, they get told no. I'm like, what do you think is eventually going to happen? And again, that type of interaction is well known in the African American community. And so when the African American community, when the African American men feel rejected by the system, they in turn reject the system. Okay? And they start redefining things on their own terms. When you don't have money, when you don't have access to money, you no longer want to define yourself by money because you don't have it. You're not going to define yourself by that which you do not have. Now you're going to go out here and you're going to define yourself by things that you basically automatically have. Which is, stuff like, oh, my character, my swag, my game. I can spit and holler at females real smooth. I'm laying pipe down. I'm sleeping with so many women. Hyper masculinity. Everything that you described, which you were right about in terms of the African American community, about everything that you described about how they're redefining their manhood. You are 100% spot on. But they're redefining their manhood because they do not have access to the money that allows white men to define themselves by money and maintaining an infrastructure and building and passing on their white legacies to their white children and so on and so forth. Okay? And one of the things that white people don't want to acknowledge is they don't really want to see black people get on their feet. Because if black people actually got on their feet and they were actually self-sufficient, that means that they would be competing for you and your children for the same jobs, the same contracts, the same, a white contractor would go into, the city council and be trying to get a bid for something, and there would be a black guy standing right there. Okay? That's what it would really mean for the African American community to stand on its feet. Okay? I'll let you guess what white unemployment might be if you had more black people that were able to get into the workforce. It would be much higher. Okay? And so black people are like, basically, as one white guy put in a video on YouTube that he had, black people are like the crocodile pit. That's what we are. We're like this crocodile pit that allows for the white elite to get away with murder because they can always turn and say, well, at least you're not like those niggers. You could be worse off. Don't come to me begging for anything else. Don't come to me asking for anything else because, hey, at least you're not like the black people in the ghetto. Right? That's what they can do. So they essentially get away with murder.